Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me on this week's episode of The Skin Reel. This week, I am thrilled to have not just a dermatologist on with me, but a researcher and an entrepreneur who is really changing things, not just in dermatology, but in medicine. I have Dr. Dhaval Bhanusali joining me today. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Can you introduce yourselves to the listeners a little bit?
Sure. So I'm a board certified dermatologist based here in Hudson Yards in New York City. But I'm a bit all over the place. I went to undergrad and med school in Michigan at Michigan State, residency at Mount Sinai in New York City. And I do a bit of everything. We've started some tech projects, which we'll get into in a sec, mostly around affordability and increasing drug access. I've built a platform for skincare products and buying devices called Air. I've done a few skincare lines. We did Amazon's first skincare line, helped formulate that one. We did one recently with Hailey Bieber called Road, and we have another project coming out soon. With Martha Stewart, sometime hopefully in the coming months. But honestly, more than anything, I tell people I'm still a doctor, and our job is to serve, and a lot of our projects are geared towards service. So that's kind of the beginning and end of most of it.
Yeah, well, it's very, very impressive. You're definitely speaking very humbly about all you have going on, but I think that's so critical that first and foremost, you are a doctor, you're a physician who still takes care of patients and sees them, and you are sort of on the front lines, seeing what some of the problems are in medicine, and then coming up with solutions for them, which is really, really cool. How did you get the idea to start your pharmaceutical company, Skin Medicinals?
So it's really, it's a lot of what we are seeing. I mean, look, medicine is backwards, very honestly, right? Often up until recently, we're sending faxes, probably like even a year ago, to a lot of
We
compounding
still
pharmacies
do
and
in
pharmacies.
my office.
Exactly, right. And so, we live so far in the past in medicine, and it's both a blessing and a curse. Obviously, it's a curse because it does, make logistics a little bit difficult in the office and slow things down. But it's a blessing because we can do something about it. This started a few years ago. Truthfully, we had patients who were paying, I don't know, $20, $25 for medications. Those same medications, same insurance were now $300, $400, and I'm sure it was the same for your patients. And I think the part that was difficult is, back then there was a bunch of lawsuits from the government against generic pharma manufacturers, accusing them of price fixing. None of us really ever knew what happened with any of those lawsuits, but the prices have never come down, and that's the truth of it,
Yeah,
right? So the problem is like, okay, we get there's a problem, but how do we solve it? And I respect regulation, I respect the governing bodies, but sometimes they're also overwhelmed with things, and we can't wait forever because every second of every day we wait, unfortunately, patients suffer the most. So we ended up
yeah,
building a technology platform because many of us had been doing compounding for a while anyway. But the biggest issue with compounding is A, it wasn't efficient, B, the prices were very high. And so I thought about like, okay, how do I solve the first problem, make it more efficient? Instead of sending those faxes or trying to call around and figure out what place had what, we tried to figure out if we can zero in on a couple of pharmacies that might be able to make kind of a listing of the things that we needed, right? Things that weren't covered by insurance. And then the idea was that if we had enough people who thought this was useful, we could hopefully negotiate down the pricing a bit to make it more palatable for our patients. Because inevitably, if the price is so high, it doesn't matter if it's compounded or not compounded, it's still not accessible, right? So if we can start pushing, like, some of the steroid medications are only $20, acne medications were $30 without insurance, whereas usually they're $45 with insurance, including just a copay. So,
right.
and what people don't realize, and obviously you do, but sometimes when there's $0 copay, it doesn't mean it's $0. It means it could be thousands of dollars to your insurance company, which will increase your premium long term, which that, again, that one quick little medication may cost you thousands of dollars over your lifetime, and you'll never realize it. And that's
Right.
part of, I think, us as physicians becoming more educated, because I don't think we really realized that for a long time as well.
Mhm.
And so, the idea was very pure. It's like, let's just see if we can help and do something about it. It's truthfully, it was a project. It was never meant to be that big. It's been very humbling. I think we've crossed 11,000 dermatologists using it at this point, and I don't know, I think 600,000 plus patients. And, if you were to tell me when we started it as a little idea that it would do 1/100th of that, I would have been shocked, right? And so my hope is that for anything I do, people look at it and be like, oh, I definitely could do that, right? Or I can do something similar, or I have an idea, I should do it. Because at the end of the day, I think all of us doctors, we're all in this together. And the more that we step in and try to solve problems, the better off we'll all be. And the problem is most times we rely on these tech companies or government agencies or businesses to come in and solve our problems, but nobody really understands our problems, and they often solve problems we don't even have. And so,
Right.
I think the motivation now is like, okay, so, this is what we're doing. How can I support you in doing the same thing? And, again, hopefully we're just an example of one of many long term that are trying to solve problems within our field and obviously medicine as a whole.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it really has helped. I know for my patients, I would write them a prescription thinking I'm doing the right thing, writing a generic prescription. It shouldn't cost them more than, $10, $20. And then I get a phone call saying it's $300 at the pharmacy. And I'm thinking, what just happened between today and
Yeah,
last week? And, I think patients think we know what the price is, but I was just
exactly.
as surprised as they were, especially
Yeah,
for a generic drug. And it's frustrating, it's maddening, and it's the patients who suffer because they can't get these generic, simple medications that we're trying to write that can really make a difference. And, it's not like we're writing for these chemo, infusions and things like that. So
right.
it's
Exactly.
great that we have this company. And I think it's these young doctors like yourself coming up, realizing, wait a minute, this is so backwards. We can do this better. And I know our patients love when I tell them I'm going to write them a prescription through Skin Medicinals. I can tell them exactly how much it's going to cost and that they're going to get an email and they have to put their credit card information in, and then they will get that prescription sent to their house or wherever they live within a matter of days. And that's just what people are used to nowadays, right?
Yeah,
You do things online, you get it sent to your house. That's just what people sort of expect. And
yeah.
all for a great price is really a win-win for everyone.
Definitely. I actually went to a pharmacy recently to get a flu shot, and I forgot how scary that place is because people are waiting. You don't know how long things are going to take. It's like you feel like you're in like a fishbowl of like, it's just like you're crowded, everything. And it's just, but again, like that's the world we lived in for so long. And, unfortunately, I don't think, again, people realize this. You can even go pharmacy to pharmacy and get different pricing with the same insurance and the same medication. And really it's luck of the draw. And that's part
Right.
of like this kind of like lack of transparency that occurs in medications. And we're trying to, and we even now, like I've talked to retail pharmacies. I'm like, how do we solve your problems? How do we create better transparency for you? Because I by no means am anti you know branded medication. I mean, I am overly expensive branded medication, but like I understand there's certain things that we can't compound or this, and you want retail pharmacies to do well. You want them to also thrive, but there's a lot of inefficiency. And like, how do we make this a better process? And that's a lot of like where, again, it could be synergistic. Like my hope with all of this stuff is that we just, as a, not just derm, but like medicine, we just become more
Right.
transparent with things. So, you don't need to go, because I could go to med school 10 more times and never understand how these things are priced. And it's just baffling, right? And as doctors, we don't understand, the patients don't really understand. And there's just like there's so much gray area that we need to solve for.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I feel like it's confusing intentionally, to not be transparent, which is even more frustrating. So do you work with a number of different pharmacies to get the prescriptions that you all offer, or do you have one pharmacy that sort of makes everything? How do you get all the whole variety that you have to
So
offer?
right now there's two of them, one on the kind of close to the West Coast, one on the East Coast, really just to get shipping times in place, but also to handle volume. Again, one of the blessings is we grew a bit quicker than expected, and the idea is like, how do we still like do this in a quality way? Like, how do you really deliver a good experience? Because at the end of the day, this is the hard part. A poor experience by us can potentially reflect negative on the doctor, right? And that's something I'm very mindful. Like I don't want one of my colleagues to suffer because we're having shipping delays or this or that. So we try to build things with efficiency, again, a lot of it was like or reprogramming the pharmacy infrastructure and rebuilding their tech pipeline so that we can build something that's efficient for them. Because a lot of them are using, I mean, you're seeing it with all these, I don't know if you've been keeping up with all the airplane delays with the very archaic systems, but
Yes.
pharmacy is not that different. They've been using these legacy systems for decades, and a lot of what we want to do is like make this more efficient for everybody. And so it's been a lot more work. I guess I'm not sure people quite understand how tough it could be to like essentially build into a software that's so old, for lack of a better word.
Right.
But it comes to the territory. Whenever you want to kind of do your own thing and really disrupt, you have to take the good and the bad, right? Nothing is easy. So it's been part of the learning experience, for myself. And even with the pharmacies, I'm thankful that they're kind of willing to play ball and allowing us to kind of redefine how they're doing things. And they've taken obviously a chance on us, especially on the compounding side. And I'll also just add, like, compounding as a whole has such a bad rap because there's definitely some bad apples in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, like, we learn from it, right? We're trying our best to be open, transparent. We're trying to do everything the right way. And, I think anything and everything can be done the right way if you actively pursue it, doing it the right way. And so it's kind of something that derms were actually doing for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, 50 years.
Right.
And then it kind of fell by the wayside as these bigger pharmaceutical companies came through. But it's kind of part of our DNA also. So in a weird way, it's actually nice to kind of go back to the roots of what we do,
Right.
and be like real doctors and pick specific ingredients for our patients and personalize again, the tailor make, like, the options for the patients. Like, I do think there's something kind of amazing in that. And for myself, if I could, not write 5 prescriptions or 6 prescriptions for a patient and really make it more efficient so there's better compliance, better other things, I do think that's a positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully by being sort of a disruptor in the pharmaceutical field, it will force these other companies who maybe are relying on these archaic systems to sort of step up to the 21st century
Right.
and modernize and make their products more efficient, more cost affordable, because I'm certainly going to go with the safest, most effective, and most cost efficient product for my patients. And other pharmacies are going to have to keep up if they want
Yeah.
to stay in business. So I think that's another benefit of what people like you are doing.
Yeah, well, my big hope, honestly, is that, and I agree with all of it. It's just, and I feel the same way. I'm hoping that and we're looking at other fields right now as well. I mean, there's a lot of unfortunate kind of inefficiency in healthcare as a whole. But I hope
Yeah.
other doctors, even in their fields, are like, hey, why aren't we doing something similar? Why aren't we doing this? Because, again, like pricing, like medication should not bankrupt people, which unfortunately it can. And you have
Right.
a recession coming, this and that. You have to be mindful of every dollar spent, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I think other fields, there's a lot of, option, like, or potential for disruption in a positive way,
Right.
with how people practice medicine. And I think now, I mean, again, God willing, we're in a place where I think doctors are now educating themselves more and more about what they're capable of and what it's okay for them to pursue and to try to figure out. Like, having a quote unquote side gig can mean a lot of things, right? It could be having a podcast, it could be building a tech thing, it could be a skincare line, it could be real estate, it could be lots of different things. But I think the idea of unlocking that part of the brain that allows you to even like accept that you can do something else outside of your day to day and think a little bit broader beyond the 4 walls of your office or whatever it is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the trick, right? And you never know what kind of magical stuff will happen thereafter. But the idea is unlocking that potential, or the thought that, like that little bit of curiosity that you can actually pursue something. Like, that's been the fun thing to watch over the last couple of years. And my emails, I've had so many from doctors being like, hey, like, I saw what you're doing, I'm doing this. I try my best to support, and I can obviously um, you know talk to everybody, but I do my best to advise, encourage, whatever it is. And I am looking forward to this next crop of projects, companies, ideas coming from doctors. And that's where I think real innovation will happen.
Yeah, no one teaches us this in medical school. It's all, patient care and sort of pathophysiology and things like that. But I do believe, like you, a component of taking care of patients is also looking at how do we fix this system? How do we make it
Right.
work? Because right now it's really not working for patients, for healthcare workers, and you can still take care of patients outside of your clinic walls. And
Right.
we see the problems firsthand, and how can we delve into this and try to come up with solutions. So I think that's really
Exactly.
powerful, and I'm glad to see it's empowering other doctors who really should be taking the charge in this, which I think is great.
Definitely.
I did read that in the past. So you started Skin Medicinals in 2018, and that in those 4 years you have saved patients over $200 million in prescription drug cost. I mean,
Yeah.
that is amazing. That is
Thank you.
amazing.
It's, like I said, it's very humbling to watch. You don't really have expectation when you're doing things like this. You honestly, if you can get a couple of your own patients to be happy with you, I feel like that's the win. And I think we're actually now over a quarter billion, which is crazy.
Wow.
And again, but the truth is, I want us to be a good example of what any doctor can do if they are willing to go on a limb and kind of jump. And that's what I'm really like, my winner of all of this stuff. Obviously, patients, I'm so thankful and happy for, but I think this is the first step in a much longer journey for healthcare entrepreneurs. And I really, really encourage anybody who's listening to this who happens to be in medicine, or even if they're not in medicine, you want to get involved in healthcare, like we need it, right? Because you can positively impact lives. And my favorite part about SM is truthfully the patient emails we get. Like, I can't tell you how many times we've had emails come in, like, I couldn't afford my medications to save me, or we've had such like positive feedback. But again, it's like you never think about that stuff when you're starting out. You're just like, I'm just going to do my best and see. And even honestly, the one thing I want to make sure I emphasize, I can't take all the credit for it, because one of the coolest things about this is I really do think that this platform has been kind of unifying for doctors, and also allow them to maybe provide more opinion than they otherwise would feel, right? So we get, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we ask for feedback all the time,
Oh, yeah.
and we actually
Sometimes I
build it.
provide it when you haven't asked.
Which is fine, yeah. And that's like that's the thing, like, part of, like, I think this whole thing I've always learned, like, do everything with humility, know that you don't know everything, take feedback from others. I mean, you can't accept every single possible thing, but you always you still absorb it, and then you try to figure out, like, how do I make this work for everybody? And we've tried our best to incorporate the feedback. We keep it simple, but every little change, we try to make it impactful. And with that, like, to get it to where it is now, where it's based on where we started, it's not me, it's everybody. And it's one of those things where the cheat code I have is I can ask my friends, like, what is the best way we can improve your life or make your office more efficient, because we have the same problems, but my office in New York may be different than your office, maybe different than the academic center we're at, or wherever it is. And so
Mhm.
trying to understand, like, how do we solve as many problems as we can for everybody, like, that's the goal. And again, I think sometimes in entrepreneurship or business or innovation, we only solve the problem we know, but you have to remember there's much bigger problems, and much more kind of diverse problems out there. So we have to kind of be aware of as much as we can.
Yeah. What do you think is next on the horizon for dermatology, or beyond dermatology medicine?
So I'll say, well, I'll answer that in two parts. One, for derm, I read a funny article today that dermatologists are the new skincare experts again, which I love, because it's
Yeah,
also weird that they weren't for a bit, but
I know.
now it's been fun to
Well, I'm
watch
glad
with
we're back.
exactly. But it's nice because even on social media, I mean, we have audiences that we can share our expertise with, which I think is really cool. And
Yeah.
I do think I'm very encouraged by seeing dermatologists. Their opinions are meaningful now. People are, like, the average consumer now is choosing science, which is really, I think, really positive. And I think marketing and stuff, people can kind of read through it, which is, really
Hmm.
nice, because I think as doctors sometimes feel helpless. We're like, Jesus. And I
Right.
think medicine as a whole, I think, it's interesting. I think a lot of I'm worried by the consolidation, obviously, on the business side of things
Hmm.
with healthcare, but it's this kind of slippery slope, because I do think efficiency is necessary. Like, right now, it's kind of like we talked about the tech and legacy tech, right?
Right.
Medicine is served in a very legacy format, and until you kind of revamp it, I think you can't quite fix the problem, because some of it's beyond fixing. You need to kind of redefine health, right? And
Hmm.
one of the big things I'm a champion of, I don't believe in going to a doctor only when you're sick. I think, much like you're doing your workouts, like, you should have a system in place with, okay, once a year I'm getting my physical for this, twice a year I'm going to check this. Even I always tell my patient, my parents are a little bit older, I tell my patients, like, if you're over a certain age, check your blood pressure once a month to see where you're at. Don't wait for a doctor
Mm-hmm.
to tell you if your blood pressure is rising or that stuff. Like, it's kind of more of a preventative mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I think if people accept that, like, I want to maintain health, as opposed to, again, only go see doctors when I'm in a negative, situation or something is wrong,
Right.
then I think people have much better long term, quality of life. Just because, I mean, I think I've shared with you, we have a colleague in our office, a dermatologist who's been sick, and she opened my eyes to, like, look, like, I am not indestructible. Like, I have to take care
Right.
of my body, take care of my mind. I should go. I can't remember the last time I saw a primary care doctor. I need to go see one. I need to get the right tests, the right this.
Right.
But it's not just me. I think all of us really should start looking at it, because whether it's for our families, our kids, our parents, whoever it is, like, we have a duty for our patients to be healthy also, and to do our best to kind of maintain who we are so that we can also serve others.
That's right. Yeah. If you're not taking care of yourself, it's hard to take care of your family, your patients, your friends. And a lot of times you put yourself last, but it's so critical to put yourself not first, but to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And it always blows my mind. I don't get, knock on wood, sick that often, but when I am, I'm like, oh man, this really
Yeah.
sucks. And
Yeah.
your health, we take it for granted when we have it, when it's good, when everything's going great, and then it's a lot of times not until something's not going well, and then you notice and you realize how bad it is when you are feeling
Yeah.
bad and sick. So
What's that saying? Like, the healthy person has many wishes, the sick person only has one.
yeah,
Like,
that's
it's so
right.
true,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. What can patients do in this kind of crazy world and expensive drug cost and things like that? Do you have any advice for anyone listening who is a patient?
I think it's worth having an honest conversation with your doctor about, like, hey, this is really expensive. Is there any other options? I think again, I think you hit on the head earlier. We don't even know, because we're
Right.
told it's a certain price. I always have a rule with any of this pharma reps. Yeah, I mean, we don't really let them in our office anymore, but prior we used to have a 3-strike rule, right? If you tell me it's this cost for my patients and they pay more than that, that's strike one. If it happens,
Yeah.
and it could happen, it could be a pharmacy error. If it happens again, strike two. If it happens third time, well, I can't support that medication, because I can't, like I said, I can't put my patient in a position where they have to choose, like, their livelihood or their health. Like, I have to
Hmm.
figure out other options, right? And it's my duty to care for them. So I can't, I have to be mindful of all this stuff. And while it's really not our fault, the background games and medication pricing, we still have, ultimately it still comes on us. We have to do what's best for our patient, or at least the best we can, right? And so, I think advocating it's okay to advocate a bit as a patient. I don't think doctors get upset by it. I think communication
No.
is important. You
Hmm.
can't, like, I know some patients get mad at us. We truthfully have nothing to do with it, but it's okay to have that conversation with your doctor. Be like, hey, is there any other options? And even with SM, like, I'll never tell people, they have to use SM or not use that. Like, it doesn't. It's whatever is
Hmm.
appropriate, always and forever, right? And there's no hard or fast rule. I mean, everything should be a personal decision, personal, like, patient to patient, person to person, doctor to doctor. But I think having that conversation, whereas we've kind of felt embarrassed about it before, I think, as even as a patient, I do worry about it. So if I check, if I have imaging or something I had to do for, I had hurt my shoulder, I'm trying to figure out how much it costs, because I don't want to, get stuck with a few $1,000 copay or whatever it is
Right.
bill. But that's normal, right? And it's okay. You don't have to be embarrassed to have that conversation, because it's practical.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Great advice. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and share this amazing stuff that you're doing, and how you're advocating for our patients and for our profession. It's really awesome and really impressive and inspiring. So thank you so much, Dr. Bhanusali.
Absolutely. Again, my privilege and my pleasure. And anytime you guys are in New York, please come by and say hi.
Yeah. So can you tell us where listeners can find you?
So on social media, it's at Dr. Bhanusali, which is, I think, across all platforms. And then here, I'm based in New York City, and my office is in Hudson Yards, although admittedly not taking new patients at the moment. It's gotten a little bit crazy. So we're playing a little bit of catch up right now. But no, I mean, a lot of, and honestly, and one last thing, I think with social media, part of what my big thing with social has been to educate, right? And I know that I can't see every patient, but I think it's been really fun to watch dermatologists educate patients and make them kind of more knowledgeable on what to look for, whether it's ingredients, procedures, even skin conditions. Like these things make a difference. And I always equate I think it was like Hugh Jackman say he shared his basal cell on his nose. I remember I
Mm-hmm.
had two patients come in within like 6 months of his first post for full checks who were less than 40. And I picked off two melanomas because of a social
Wow.
media post. And so I always tell
Wow.
people, like, social can be used for good as long as you use
Right.
it for good. And, my hope with my own, channels and this and that is that we can educate people. And, again, if I can't see somebody in the office, at least they can see a little bit about me and I can teach them something that's useful.
Yeah, absolutely. We realize it's hard to get in to see a dermatologist, so hopefully, I know that's what I'm trying to do here on this podcast too, is just give people real factual information from a dermatologist, and I know that's what you're doing on your platform, so that's great. All
Thank you.
right, well, it was great having you on. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Take